I don't think Indiana's a great matchup for Ohio State. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to win. That doesn't mean they're going to beat Ohio State. It doesn't mean they're going to cement their place in the college football playoff. It just means that I don't think Indiana's a great matchup for Ohio State. The one thing the Hoosiers do really, really well is get their players in one-on-one matchups. If you watch Indiana play, and it will be somewhat familiar to Ohio State fans on Saturday, that it's essentially the Urban Meyer offense. It's a power run, spread option, not necessarily chucking the ball horribly downfield all the time. Dink and dunk, take what the defense gives you from a spread perspective. It's Urban Meyer's offense, essentially. And what they do really well is get players in one-on-one matchups. And if there's one thing that Ohio State's defense has not done well in 2024, first, I think people would tell you that they haven't gotten to the passer all that well. I don't think that's necessarily true. The production hasn't been there, but they've gotten to the passer. It's play on an island. Ohio State's cornerbacks, pretty much one in particular, got burnt crispy time and time again against Oregon. And that was not necessarily with Oregon trying to have one-on-one matchups time after time. That's what Indiana wants. Because Indiana, and give Curt Cignetti credit, he knows that when we try to play 11 on 11, probably doesn't go well for IU. We try to play one-on-one, we got a hell of a lot better shot beating one-on-one than 11 on 11. And so you want to put people on an island over and over and over again. And if Ohio State's defensive backfield hasn't gotten better in that aspect of being a one-on-one, it's not a great matchup. I'm not going to sit here and make a prediction on the game. I just think that's an interesting aspect to look at it because there are dozens of ways to look at this game. And one of the big ones, I think, is really interesting to me is can you be so ignorant that it is an advantage? Because, for instance, this is the third top 5 matchup Ohio State will play this year. Indiana, Penn State, Oregon. 3 games where both teams are in the top 5 of the country. Third one this year. It's the first time Indiana in the history of their program will play a top 5 matchup. Just sit there and assess what that means for a second. It's the third time since the middle of October that Ohio State will have done it. And it's the first time in the last 145 years that Indiana has done it. And I wonder can you be so ignorant of the pressure that you don't, because Ohio State's going to be keenly aware of what that feeling, that setting, that situation, the preparation, everything that goes into a top 5 matchup. Every player on the roster is going to have experienced it for the third time in 6 weeks. Indiana's never done it. And a bunch of their players, their quarterbacks, a transfer from Ohio. They got a bunch of players from James Madison. They have not done this before. Can you turn that into an advantage where you don't feel like you have the pressure, where you feel as if potentially all the pressure is on Ohio State? It's your building. You're the team that everybody expects to win. And hell, half the SEC is rooting for you because they think if you win, if Ohio State beats Indiana, that they're going to get in the college football playoff. Can you convince your players that all of that is true? That Ohio State, who hadn't lost to Indiana since 1989, that all the pressure is on them and not on you? I wonder if that is possible, because I think it probably is. I think you can convince a college football roster that this is just another game, and we have handled our business week after week after week after week. Now, whether everybody buys into that or not, I don't know. But I do think it's because Ohio State keenly recognizes, like, hey, we are 1-1 in these games. And there is a sizable portion of the country who could argue that you should be 0-2 in those games. And somewhat historically, under Ryan Day, Ohio State hasn't performed well in those games. Indiana doesn't have any idea what that situation is like, what that feeling is like, what the pressure that comes with being in a situation where your season could be on the line. Can you be ignorant enough that, like, hey, our season isn't on the line? We still feel really good about our standing, even if we don't win. Can you be the Cinderella story? Because I think it's a super interesting dynamic where Indiana is undoubtedly the underdog on Saturday. And we love underdogs. Watch damn near any sports movie ever. It's not about the team that you thought was going to kick everybody's ass, kicked everybody's ass. That's generally not how those stories go. Indiana is and also ran in the college football landscape. But there are a group of 5 programs who have more history, success, and tradition than Indiana does in football. They're undefeated. They're in the top 5. And damn near any other year, Indiana is America's team. And yet, there's a sizable portion of the college football fan base that despises Indiana. That despises that they are the number 5 team in the country. That is disgusted by the fact that they could even be considered a college football playoff contender. I think you can use that to your advantage. That we are the underdog to the point that nobody believes in us. And the reason they don't believe in us is because they hate us. I think love is a really powerful emotion. You know what's the second most powerful emotion? Is revenge. And Indiana has a lot of probably pent-up anger, frustration about the way they've been talked about for the past couple of weeks. Because at first it was a cute story. Look at what Curt Cignetti's doing in Bloomington. Holy cow. What a nice little story. And then they just kept winning. And when you just keep winning, when you're a disruptor in a space that hates disruptors, you go from cute little thing that's like, oh, man, I don't know how you couldn't be on board with that to we got to figure out we got a problem here. And we got to make sure that this isn't a problem. There are a lot of people rooting against Indiana on Saturday. And I think you use that for motivation. So I think you couple with the fact that they want to play one-on-one on the outside and that Curtis Work has not beat himself, has not led Indiana to beat themselves, coupled with a really interesting mindset. And there's 2 ways to look at the top 5 matchup thing. You can either say, we've never done it, so it's not going to be intimidating to us, or you're pretty much completely intimidated by the situation. I would lean more towards, just from watching them, that they would be more towards the like, yeah, it's just a game. It's just a big game that we're going to play. It's not a top 5. If we lose this, our season is over. If we win, I don't think they're going to enter with that mindset. Again, I'm not saying that Ohio State loses to Indiana by any stretch of the imagination on Saturday. I just think the way they want to play is not necessarily a good matchup for the Ohio State defense. That's not to say anything for the Ohio State versus Indiana defense matchup. But don't be surprised if it's a game on Saturday. I think we might be in for a pretty good one. And I wonder what the reaction is if we are. If it's a close loss for Indiana, what do we do then? We just might have to talk about that on Sunday. Want to know your thoughts? Drop in the comments below your score prediction for Ohio State, Indiana. What do you think is going to happen in the Horseshoe on Saturday? Would love to hear your thoughts. in the comments below. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out. If you're listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you on Sunday for another episode of the Daily Huddle.